What page are we on? It's in so many places. I just saw it on another page. We'll recite in English. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Okay, so today, I think everybody knows that Rinpoche, Lama Zopa Rinpoche took his last breath on Thursday, 9:30 a.m. in Kathmandu, Nepal time. And yesterday, so Rinpoche was in clear light meditation. So sitting up, Rinpoche looked like if you've seen the clip online, it looked like Rinpoche was just going to, because many times when Rinpoche would be teaching, would be like, and then eyes would open and continue on. It looked just like that. So Rinpoche then, yesterday, yesterday afternoon, evening, not yesterday, the day before, sorry, Rinpoche, which day was the 14th? That was the day before.
Today's the 16th and it's Sunday.
No, today's the 16th.
Yeah. So 14th was Friday.
14th, yeah. So Rinpoche, when we were looking at death and rebirth, and we talked about it can be a drop of blood that comes from the nostril when the consciousness departs. So that happened. And we've got these two long life prayers, one from composed by Jado Rinpoche. So Jado Rinpoche is very close within FPMT. He's not a FPMT Lama, so to speak, but he's very, very close and teaches a lot for FPMT. Actually, today, in terms of karma, we're looking at the 12 links of dependent origination, and I noticed that Jado Rinpoche is actually also teaching on that in July for a few days at Tashida, and it'll be online as well. So also we have a long life prayer that Kadrala has composed while she was flying to Kathmandu on the plane, and just sang it spontaneously. So the people on the plane were the first ones to hear. She probably did in Tibetan. She did actually, because it was, as it says, very quickly translated by Lotsawa. Lotsawa is the word for translator, Fabrizio Bellato. So he's in Italy, to be able to recite it on the auspicious day, provisional. So he quickly translated it, but there might be some updates of it in future. There's also long life prayer, prayer for the swift return. I keep saying long life, because I'm just sort of feeling Rinpoche's presence continually, which is what we want. So anyway, so that, where was I up to? Yes, His Holiness has composed in Tibetan, but we have yet to, it's being translated at the moment into English, and I'm sure it'll take a very lot of care before they want that going out there, and so rather than, I mean, Kandrila obviously wanted it swiftly out there, of course. So, and it's always good to pray for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, for any of our precious gurus, so that we, as when we're looking at the spiritual teacher, we make those frequent requests, you know, to come back and to continue on. The FPMT board this morning, oh, well, I received it this morning. I don't know when they sent it. Also, just to reassure people that the process is in place with His Holiness the Dalai Lama advising about the future spiritual leadership of FPMT, and that Rinpoche, I mean, they've been talking about it for at least 10 years, as far as I know publicly. But in January, Rinpoche reiterated that no one person can take over that role because, of course, the organisation, since Rinpoche took on the role in the early 70s, has grown and grown and grown and grown. And so they did mention Ken Rinpoche, Geshe Chuni will be taking a big role. He already is taking a big role. But anyway, we're in safe hands. I guess that's what they want to reassure us. We're in safe hands. So let's recite these two long life prayers and then we'll go on with our topic. So Jado Rinpoche, prayer for the swift return of Lama Thubten Zopa Rinpoche. You who endured the hardships of spreading the teachings of the Buddha in general, and especially the teachings of the Konpo Manjushri, Lord in the 10 directions, O Lord, O holder of the 3 vows, Lord of Dharma, who is clad in saffron rose, may you quickly return as the matchless glory of the teachings. You upheld the Dharma of study and practice through great austerities, unable to bear transmigratory beings who are suffering and are confused by the darkness of ignorance. With great love, you skillfully establish them in happiness. May the incomparable Son of Dharma quickly return. You are adorned with the ornament of supreme patience of spreading the practice of the authentic supreme teachings of the Conqueror through study, contemplation, and meditation. You guide all transmigratory beings on the correct path. May the qualified Venerable Guru quickly return. And so the colophon here, composed by Jado Rinpoche, this aspirational prayer for the swift return of the Supreme Refuge, Thubten Zopa Rinpoche, who spread the teachings of the Conqueror in general and specifically the teachings of the second Conqueror Manjushri, Lord in all directions, due to his aspiration and prayers, and who has manifested passing into the peace of Nirvana, was put together for the complete fulfillment of all his profound wishes and the discovery of the fresh full moon of his unmistaken emanation. So this was written by the one who holds the name Abbot Emeritus Jado Tulku in Munigiana Center in Italy. There's a lot happening in Italy. Geshe Sharon's in Italy, Jado Rinpoche is in Italy, and Venerable Fabrizio is in Italy. Okay, and so then from Kadrala, we don't have a recording of the tune, but just imagine it's ethereal. A desperate request for the quick return of Kayapse Zopa Rinpoche. Lama, you know, I beg you to listen to me, gentle Root Lama. I appeal to you with a sudden desperate request. Do not deprive us of your compassion refuge. Lam, you are the blessings of the Buddha of the 3 times, even though you are now in the great pervasive bliss of the unobstructed sphere of clear light. It is now that we need your great compassion. Quickly emanate the supreme body of the transcendental wisdom emanation from the various emanations of the dance of the great compassion of the supreme mind. Arise, rise. Return from the sphere of the Dharmakaya. I invoke you, I invoke you, I invoke you for the sake of beings. Do not remain in the pure land of Dakini and other pure lands. Please return at once to make the scriptural and realization teachings flourish for sentient beings of the world to the south. That's here, southern continent, Jambudvipa. That's what that reference is, as opposed to going somewhere else. You can go to somewhere else at the same time. Come back right away, because the desperate beings are kind and are desperately calling you. They want to see you. They want to be blessed in body, speech, and mind. We are the sentient beings hallucinated and confused by the conception of ignorance in the sphere of the luminous emptiness of the three supreme bodies. We confess the samayas that we have degenerated. Let there be the auspiciousness of emptiness and compassion, the supreme auspiciousness of all auspiciousness. Let there be the auspiciousness of the quick meeting of the disciple and the Lama. By the power of the truth of unchanging reality, may the perfect reincarnation quickly appear. I, the Dakini, with pure faith in sorrow and weeping in despair, due to the blessings of the three roots, may the wish of this beggar be fulfilled. Object, I, subject, and action in the sphere of the reality of luminosity and bliss are, on this special day of the Dakini in the state of great distress, these prayers came to Yogini Kandro Seligna. That was yesterday. So yesterday, so His Holiness, His Excellence Ling Rinpoche advised, and it was confirmed by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, that rather than a cremation, that Rinpoche be embalmed. And so they have, that process started yesterday at 7:30 p.m. according to Cardrali's divination, 7:30 p.m. in Nepal time, so after about 9:45 our time p.m. And it'll take 3 months. And so they have these lamas who are involved in that embalming process, and that had previously been involved in the embalming of Troshik Rinpoche, who was one of the senior teachers of His Holiness Dalai Lama. So it's, and the reason that Ling Rinpoche gave for that, and FPMT is very happy, was that so as students we can continue to go to Kopan and pay homage to Rinpoche there. Of course, Rinpoche is able to emanate as many emanations, not like that's it. He's stuck there. Don't think like that. Yeah. Anyway, so that's, and if anybody wants to have a chat or just feels, you don't have to feel upset. We'll have a chat about it. Or if there's questions, I'm quite happy to answer those if I can. And so, as you're probably aware, we have ongoing practices. So we do Vajrasattva Song this afternoon, and then I've requested folks throughout this 49 days. Now we're into that process. So up until the 31st of May, to recite at least one time the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. I'm looking over here because we've got some copies here. It's also, I don't know if it got sent out. I asked for it to be sent out. It hasn't been sent out yet. Yeah, well, we've been a bit busy during the prayers and then trying to fit everything else in. So there are some copies here. They're library copies. So, but we would like to have some in the Gompa so that we can recite here together. So if people wish to drop in anytime, we're open 10 to 2 every day. If you want to drop in, just have a cuppa in the chat, or if you want to do some recitation or some quiet reflection, or just sit with Rinpoche, it's totally open like that. Okay. And then other pujas, so that anyway, there's pujas going on all around the world. I know people are zooming in. I've zoomed into a few. But there's a site, Shantideva Center in New York has a site which has all the ones that they're aware of around the world that get sent from the different regions. So all the Australian ones get sent there, European, Southeast Asia, North America. Okay, right. So I thought it, yes.
Sorry, can I just clarify? So the request is that over these 49 days to recite.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
To recite once or once a week.
Okay. Okay.
So
yeah.
one full recitation or once a week. And if anyone who's like reciting here, like we did Sangata Sutra recitation yesterday morning, and we got just over halfway through. And so it was a matter of just marking up the book. This is where to continue on from that one. But the Bodhisattva's way of life as well, if people are reciting them here with these copies, just pop in a page mark and then maybe somebody can continue on. It's also available online. There's a translation by, the one I have is very pretty. I mean, we could send it around. I'm looking at you, I don't know why, to the DB, to everyone's email. It's very pretty. It's the one that's currently used for the basic program in FPMT, and it's all beautifully illustrated. So it'll invoke great joy as you recite it. But I wasn't sure if it was too big to send out. So we'll experiment with that and send it out, and you can let me know if you receive it. There are also, if you go Bodhisattva's Way of Life, you'll find like the Stephen Batchelor translation. There's one translation, the Padmakara translation group. Venerable, there's so the one that I got, it was Siji. So she translates a lot of the basic program materials. She's a master's program graduate. And also Alan Wallace translation as well. So there's a number of, and you'll see here, there are versions of each of those there. Okay, so I would just mention that speaking about karma, our dear Venerable Pekar here had the great fortune to meet Kyabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche, first time in her life, because first time she's gone overseas, in Dharamsala at Tashita. And that was just a few weeks ago, right?
Yeah, a month ago.
A month ago. So I think out of everyone here, she's been in Rinpoche's presence most recently. Okay. So all those teachings that we have about death and rebirth and that whole process of abiding in the clear light, here we can see it all happening. Also, we can see happening the fact that Rinpoche was fine. He was in Sum. And then he was unfine. He got altitude sickness, quickly flown back down, and they couldn't, and then he stopped breathing, they couldn't revive him. So that happened very, very quickly. Yeah, so I know the first person who contacted me just before we got the message from CPMT, and he said, "Is it true? Is Rinpoche alive?" And I went, "Oh, yes." And then, "Oh, no."
Apparently it went out on the Voice of Tibet before.
Yeah, it was a Voice of Tibet link, but FPMT had to have given that. Anyway, it's okay. Oh, I'm looking for my notes on the wrong place. So, could you hand over? So today we're looking at the 12 links of dependent origination, or 12 branches of dependent origination. So this image here represents that, this bigger image here. And you'll see on every, I can't exactly say every, but usually as you come into a gompa, it's on the outside wall. At Vajrayana Institute, it's on the inside wall there because it's a huge tanka, and it, because of the height of the ceiling, it wouldn't fit outside. And this is coming in this blank space over there. So this was one of the experiments for, it's going to be a mural on that wall behind that. Just visualize it there, right? Coming to a wall near us soon. And this was one of the very first images at the time of the Buddha. The Buddha instructed this to be like an instruction So you can see it's all pictorial. And for those, you know, you don't have to need a translation because it's all pictorial. Of course, we need a translation of what all the bits and pieces mean. So we're going to go through that. Just a minute. Okay. All right, so you can see, well, you hopefully can see, there are many different versions. Actually, the version that's on Toshida, which is, I think, toshida.info, the image that they've got is Rinpoche's preferred interpretation. And that was actually guided by Jado Rinpoche, that he was guiding that one. And it's very, you know, vibrant colours. We want that to be that one to be the one on that wall, of course, because it's the one that Rinpoche prefers. And it's got beautiful colours in it, but we haven't yet been able to find a way to project it on the wall. So
I have a picture of it.
we have pictures of it, but it's making it big enough to be able to then draw it on the wall. So if you know any artists as well, Tanka painters, well, we do know some, but whether they're available or not, it's another thing. Okay, so, you know, the reason of this being on as you enter the Gompa is to remind us of impermanence, life and death. And this is exactly what we're being advised at this time when Rinpoche's taken his last breath, and you think, oh, I won't be able to ask Rinpoche this, I won't be able to maybe meet Rinpoche, you know. And so, yeah, so here, first of all, maybe I'll just first of all start with this big monstrous looking figure. He's got the fangs and the claws on hands and feet, who's gripping this wheel, which is the wheel of life. So this is Yama, the Lord of Death. And the wheel in the middle represents samsara. In other words, wherever we're born in this sphere, there's suffering. That, as we talked about in the Four Noble Truths, you know, as that refers to be able to identify what suffering is, to be able to abandon the causes of suffering, to be able to follow the path that leads to the cessation of suffering. It leads to this state of bliss or nirvana. So above that, you have the Buddha and the text on the other side. This one doesn't have the text. It has the pointing to the moon, which is correct. And so they're out of samsara. They're completely pure, have no negative, disturbing minds, afflictions, and so forth, have only just everything, have realized all the positive potential there is to be, of Sangye Buddha, completely purified, all the toxic emotions, all the disturbing thoughts, all the negativity, and completely realized all that there is to be realized, omniscience. So that's there. And then can you hold this side up? So this one doesn't have the text, it has a Buddha, how to become a Buddha, right? There you go. Come from Buddha to Buddha. So that pointing, there is the moon there. It says Buddha's pointing at the moon. There it's only a quarter moon, so it's an increasing moon. They say this is the path to enlightenment. You know, follow the path to enlightenment. And if we think about it, sometimes it's just the moon. And so we could think about it, if that's the way, what does the moon represent? Bodhicitta, great compassion, great loving kindness. If you think His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, my religion is kindness. He doesn't say my religion is Buddhism. He says it's kindness. So you can think how that necessary that is to achieve that state, to get over ourselves, basically, isn't it? So what this Tibetan text says here, and this was composed by the Buddha, make effort to destroy it. In other words, this wheel of suffering. Enter the Buddha Dharma, eliminate the Lord of Death, like an elephant destroys a brass hut. Whoever takes up the practice of Vinaya, which is ethical conduct, with great conscientiousness, abandons the cycle of rebirth and thus brings an end to suffering. So basically, the Buddha is saying, this is how to do it. I mean, this is what it is, and then how do we reverse that process is what this is showing. Okay. So in the middle, we have a pig, and then it often referred to as rooster, but that doesn't look like a rooster to me. It looks like a pheasant, or it looks like a different type of bird. Anyway, it's usually a bird of some sort. Well, it is always a bird of some sort. We can interpret it as we like. And then a snake. And you'll notice that we could say chasing each other's tail, that the tail of each one is in the mouth of the other, right? And so it's basically saying these three, what we call root poisons, or three root poisons, the three most afflictive states of mind are what give rise to our suffering. This is why we suffer. And so the root one, ignorance, is represented by a pig. I always feel sorry for pigs. My sister had pigs and she said they were very smart. So I don't know why they don't like pigs. Actually, in other texts, they say elephant, not for this, in another context, 8 great fears, and the elephant represents ignorance. So merely labeled on a pig, okay? We don't. Anyway, it's representing ignorance in this one. The bird I get representing attachment, because they're like pick, attached to, objects of desire. And the snake represents aversion. Now, I'm sure a snake is very attractive to another snake. It's coming from our, what we say, anthropomorphic, is that the right word, point of view, where a lot of people have aversion to snakes. Not everybody, but a lot of people do. So it's representing also anger. If I think about it in that context, the hissing of a snake, like you're hissing with anger. So that way you can see there's a bit of an analogy going on. And so these are so intricately interconnected that, sometimes the pig is shown with the 2 coming out of the pig's mouth. So that out of our ignorance, we could say all the disturbing states of mind arise from our root ignorance. And what is that root ignorance? Not being in sync with reality. Having our deluded minds, making up stories and labeling things and creating confusion. I like the translation confusion better than English, ignorance, because it really says it as it is. We're totally confused about reality, we don't recognize how we create that separation between me and everything else, the rest of the world. I mean, yes, you would say we all make a total universe around ourselves, and we live in our own universe. And he didn't say, but I'm thinking we bump up against other people's universes. They have different worldviews, but mine's right. Okay, we know how it is, right? So that's that inner circle. That's what that is representing. Then around that is on the next concentric circle is there's beings free falling downwards in the dark part. So this represents through our ignorance, through our attachment, through our greed, through our aversion, hatred, seeking revenge, ill will, malice, and all of the other afflictions. We act in ways that cause harm. Initially, it causes harms to ourselves through our ways of thinking, but if we are not able to transform that, if we're not able to prevent it, magnifying and manifesting in action, then we're also causing harm for others. This is what we see with, the wars going on in the world, the Ukraine-Russian conflict and other conflicts in the world, or even in our interpersonal relationships when we lash out at others and we cause harm to them, we cause greater harm to ourselves. I mean, it's a pretty unhappy state of mind, isn't it? But mostly we're not aware that we can actually change that state of mind. Even though this represents how we're thrown into existence by our karma, we'll get to that, still we know that we have the ability as humans to transform. We do it all the time at school. We learn new things, more new things, and we learn reality. Even the Dalai Lama, when he was in Tibet and isolated from the rest of the world, and he had his telescope, and Tibet was isolated at that time. We're talking early, 1950 or something. And so they had a belief in a flat earth. They thought the earth was flat. There they were up on the rooftop of the world with a flat earth. I don't know how they accounted for all the mountains and everything. Anyway, but His Holiness looks through his telescope, and through his telescope, he must be very high resolution telescope, able to see that actually, in fact, see the rotation of, the sort of movement of the planets across the sky, and goes, oh no, it's round. And so they chuck out it's flat and go, oh, it's round, new discovery. So we have discoveries like that all the time where we thought this was impossible. I mean, who thought you could print off things from a printer that actually are things?
3D.
3D printing. Still can't get my head around 3D printing, but but I'm old school. When fax machines came out, I used to look at it and go, how do you go from there to there? Anyway, yeah. So we have, so crashing down to lower realms, which means more intense suffering because of creating harm, as the Buddha's first teaching was, do no harm and subdue your mind. So first of all, with what you say and what you do, please don't harm others. And that's hard enough. And then subdue your mind is even harder, which is get to the root cause. So that's what that inner hub is saying. These negative states of mind, confused states of mind, angry states of mind, greedy states of mind, so forth, are causing us problems. And if we get rid of that, we get rid of the whole thing altogether. It's where the Buddha said, overcome the Lord of Death. And then we can arrive at a state of peace, a state of equanimity of the mind where everything's possible. This is why things like, Lama Zopa Rinpoche sitting in clear light, the body, he stopped breathing, the body's still fresh looking like he's just had a little nap. Like, it's beyond us, isn't it? In our experience, that doesn't happen, right? But if you're a being such as His Holiness Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who say takes that human form for our benefit, and just look, I mean, he's already said, you need more than one person to take over what I've been doing in the world. And that's not including what Rinpoche was doing in Tibet and the support there. And let alone whatever other things Rinpoche was doing, we know nothing about, because it just seems too mind-blowing. How can one person be capable of all of this? But we see this many times in the world where people are capable of much more even than they thought they were capable of. It's just a matter of believing that and training our mind, not, that everything is possible. Okay, so they're the downward going ones. And then the upward going ones seem to be in a more orderly fashion. I was looking this morning and going, well, there's a slight evolution as you go up. There's making offerings, and then there's an ordained monk. I don't know if he's it's representing the 9 stages of shamatha, because just as going up, it looks like he could be flying. And then Buddhahood at the top. So that is showing going up to higher realms of existence. And of course, not just because we are human, we say that the human realm is the best. because we are able to transform our minds, and because we also know suffering. Because the next one out is the 6 realms you can be born into. So usually we have 6 divisions in this one. I know it starts to get a bit blurry, but there's 5 divisions in this one, because in the upper left, I was going to say quadrant, but you can't have 5 quadrants. Anyway, that sector, the 2 God realms are there with the arrows shooting up and down. They're in the one sort of thing. So that represents the God realms. You've got the lower ones, the jealous gods, shooting arrows up to the higher God realm, because the roots of the tree are in the lower God realm. But who's getting the benefit? Who's getting all the fruit? The upper God realm. So this is the typical neighbor fence dispute. The tree, the fruit, and and who's responsible for the tree, and all sorts of disputes we have over the fence. I've heard so many people tell me of their neighbor. Oh, talking of fence, we've got a new fence, for which we were very grateful, because the last one had asbestos and was cracking. We were a little bit worried. Anyway, it's all been changed just the other day. Well, thank you to the council. Okay, so that's the God realms. So even they say God realms, they're not very happy gods. I always think it's like the people in the cushy suburbs, and I always forget, what are the cushy suburbs of Perth?
Dalkey.
What?
Dalkey.
Dalkey? Peppermint Grove. It sounds it. Peppermint Grove. Is anyone from Peppermint Grove? You wouldn't say that if you were, right? You're in the cushy, you're doing really well, but because in this instance, in the God realms, because they've got all their needs, apart from the jealous gods not getting their fruit. And so you live a very happy, blissful life based on the sensory pleasures, but it all comes crashing down. So we say all that positive merit or positive karma that you've accumulated to be reborn in a place where you have wealth and so forth, if you don't use it to good avail, there are many people who use their wealth to benefit the world, but there are some that we can probably call to mind who are just very greedy and, not using it for benefit. Because you'd say the karma of having wealth comes from practice of generosity, being generous. Whether you have something or not, we can be generous of our time. We can sit with our friends. We can listen to them all day. We can take them shopping. We can do all sorts of things to benefit people. And that's all, as it said, just even the wish to benefit others, to be generous to others, is the practice of generosity. So that by not doing that, and by just getting it all for me, which is what all the wars are about, then they go crashing down to more suffering realms of existence. So at the end of their life, they get this prediction. At the end of the life, it's like you see your next life coming. Steve Jobs, I watched that movie about him, and he didn't seem like a nice character, but towards the end, like he was Buddhist, and so towards the end, you see him at his deathbed, and I don't think it's in this movie, but this is what happened: is he apologized to his daughters for leaving them. This movie portrayed him having a sort of rather fractious relationship with them. But then he apologized. I'm sorry, I'm leaving you. And then he seemed to look beyond and go, wow, wow, wow. Now, at death time, if you've got a wow, 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 it means it's looking quite attractive. And like people who have near-death experiences, and they talk about this white light and, this feeling of, it's an attractive feeling. You want to be more there than here type thing. And so that having that in your mind at that time means that that's going to be a good rebirth. Whereas if we're grasping onto this life and wanting to hold on to everyone around us and so forth, then we're going to have a more suffering time. We're reborn because of, in the Buddhist presentation, because of grasping at having a body. Hey, look, if we grasped at having a human one, I think we're doing really well. I mean, if you're going to grasp at a body, a human one's pretty good, right? And given that we are human, if at the end of your life and you're there with your loved ones and that's, the last thing you see, and, perhaps that aspiration of human rebirth will ripen right there. So we don't know all the mechanics of karma, only a Buddha knows. It's very complicated. So we've got the God realms, and next to them up the top is what is represented is the human realm, right? But this is a 2,600-year-old presentation, so it's not going to have skyscrapers and, it's not going to be a modern world presentation, although there is one of the books through Wisdom Publications, and it's totally updated. And the images, they have like computers and televisions and things like that. Yeah. So that's the human realm. And then to the side of the human realm is what we call the predator realm or hungry ghost realm. And think that rather than that these are different places, they're different states of mind that we can all have. So in the predator realm, the hungry ghost realm, I call this the one of addiction, the constant craving that you want and you're never satiated. Here it's presented with having like distended stomachs and long necks. And it says that, water to a being in the God realms is like nectar. Water to a being in the predator realm is like pus. So you're never satisfied and everything's sort of contaminated, or the water dries up and so forth. So I think we can see this happening in parts of the world. And my mind always goes to Africa and seeing the poor starving people in Africa, and not just Africa, but different places we can think. So we can say it can be an environmental circumstance, but it can also be a state of mind, the mind of addiction. As the Buddha said, we're all addicted. It's just a matter of degrees, that we all have attachment. We live in what's called a desire realm. I mean, no, I don't desire very much until I go to a shopping centre. And it's like, especially now, I'm going to India, and so I'm visiting shops that I wouldn't normally visit. I'm not just going for my groceries. I'm like, it's going to be -4 degrees. What do I need to buy? And suddenly the eyes go, and see, the hands go. So Lama Zopa Rinpoche at one time said, watch what your mind does. Don't buy anything, but watch what your mind does. I told Geshe Sultan, he said, well, that's a waste of time going to the shops and not buying anything. Just watch that type of mind. That's the mind there, clinging, grasping. And the whole sort of section at the bottom is the hell realms, of which we have 8 hot. So it's on the right-hand side, that's representing fire and so forth. And then the other side is the icy, well, actually more the bottom bit. And then we have the icy cold hells. And in between we have 4 nearing hells. And when you read the sorts of suffering are in those hell realms, it's not like, you've been doomed and someone sent you to hell. It's not like that at all. It's really the case of the intense sufferings we can have. When I visit, people in prison, or they write to me or write to us, and I'd go, that's a hellish existence. Like I read on the newsfeed, this guy, elderly gentleman who was drunk and drove in and killed someone by his car being out of control. He had dementia as well and everything else. And he's been spared so far from actually going to prison because they said we won't be able to provide the sort of support that he needs, right? And in that way, he's very fortunate. He's got the karma not to go to prison, even though having killed someone, right? And that would be a ripening from some past life karma, because somewhere else he might have been put in prison regardless. but having visited prisons a lot, and the forensic units where people who are deemed not responsible for their crime due to mental illness and seen their suffering, it is like this hell realm suffering that just like can't access anything positive at all in their minds. They're just not able to. Their minds are totally out of control, you know, with mental illness. And so we can say these states of existence are like that. There's no, you know, talk about the hell without respite. There's no respite from that suffering. You know, here in our human realm, yes, we know what it is to suffer, you know, but we also know the possibility of being free of that. If your mind is totally in that state, hellish state, you don't see that possibility. Like, I saw a woman in Coolangatta, or she saw me actually. I was shopping. I don't always go shopping. It sounds like I always go shopping.
Very rarely go shopping. Only she absolutely has to.
I was at Best and Less. Real big time shopping in Coolangatta. Anyway, I saw her in the store, and then when I came out, I mean, she caught my eye but didn't say anything. Then I came out and she did, and she was picking up cigarette butts off the pavement to smoke, you know, and she looked very desperate, and I started talking to her, and everything in her life was negative. She couldn't think of anything positive, and the more we talked, the more insistent she was. There was nothing positive in her life. And so no matter what suggestions, she was not open to anything, because all that she could feel was that intensity of suffering. That's a hellish existence, isn't it? Or being in a war zone, that's a hellish existence. So we can look at many examples in the human realm for those. Okay. Then the one above that is, you know, going around clockwise, is the animal realm. You can see the animals. The animals, even we think they're highly intelligent, have very little capability of transforming their minds, and they mostly, like not just in the wild, I was going to say particularly in the wild, but they're mostly in fear of being killed, being preyed upon, you know, by bigger ones. And the bigger ones are full of pride. But still, you know, being born in the animal realm is being born in intense fear. Even the little pets, like, you know, lucky then who got to be a pet of a Dharma practitioner that could have Dharma maybe played in their ears, and, you know, at least they know they're on a good wicket. Like I got this years ago when I could have dogs. I had a rescue dog, and she was fearful for the first day or so, and then she realized she was on a good wicket, and then the fear went, except when we were flying from Sydney to Melbourne, which we did frequently. She wanted to come because she went straight into her little traveling cage. I'm ready to go, but then at the other end you could smell the fear. It's a terrifying experience for them, even they want to go.
It's not that they want to go, it's that they don't want to be part of the new.
Yeah, once I started packing my bag, she'd go into that. I'm coming with you. Anyway, what an existence, right? So they're the different realms that we can be born into according to our karma. And then the outer, so really we want to get rid of the middle hub. The outer rim shows what is called the 12 links, so that how we come into existence. So the first one, up the top, beneath the fang on your right-hand side, Yama's left fang, you can see there's this stooped figure with a cane. So that's a blind person, and that represents ignorance, that we're blinded by our ignorance. It doesn't mean blind people are ignorant. It doesn't mean that. It's just an image to represent all of our ignorance, that we're stooping around in the dark, not knowing where the hell, can't make sense of things. You know, we say that. Why is it that this happens? Why is it that bad things happen to good people and things like that. How is it that these things work? And it's, from a point of view of karma, you have to have that belief in past lives and future lives, but particularly in past lives, that the karma we experience in this life is not from what we've done in this life, generally. I mean, there is some immediate karma, but generally it's come as the imprints in our minds from past lives. So that even in one family, like my siblings, all of us learnt music, right? And so we could say that that was a condition of this life because my parents were very musical, all singing, all dancing, playing musical instruments, and so we all learnt that. My brothers are, all of them. Anyway, two of my brothers are computer whiz. My eldest brother didn't, while he was supposed to be sitting for his teacher's certificate back in the day, a long time ago, he was making video games. Gee, I wish he had continued because he would be rich now. He didn't. It was just fun before they became fun. Electronics was his thing. These are things I cannot do. I have no idea. I mean, my computer skills are pretty basic, just what I need to get by. So you could say that could be a karma thing. Now you could say, well, last century, no, 50 years earlier, 70 years earlier, some of my siblings, they wouldn't have been computer whizzes, but they'd have the type of brain that could do that sort of thing. Me, no. I went the creative arts side. No. That's where it's my comfort zone. So, and I went the nun side. Nobody else in my family is, I'm not saying they're not religious, but they're not, there's never been anyone else in my whole family going back. My mother did our trees way back, our family trees. Nobody has been ordained in any tradition. So that, and Lama Zopa Rinpoche said that to me, past lives, many times ordained. I'd only wished I'd asked him, in what tradition? Because I grew up Catholic and I wanted to be Catholic nun and then moved away from that. And so I became a Buddhist nun because that's more, but I didn't give up on being a nun, right? So I would have, but Rinpoche would probably say, you've done everything. We've all done everything there is to be done. So that root ignorance that then propels us into existence. And so the next one is karmic formation. In other words, represented here by a potter molding clay. So the molding the clay is all the different types of karma, all the different shapes of pots that are coming out, all our different types of karma that's created. Right. So from our ignorance, it generates that. And so just like the clay pot can be molded into all sorts of shapes and sizes, so our different karma brings different results. So in general, as we've looked at previously, a negative thought, motivation will bring a negative result. If I want to harm somebody, if I want to take revenge on somebody, if I get angry thoughts, so forth, it's going to be not a good outcome. Whereas a virtuous one, can I help you? Or expression of love, expression of compassion. Oh, I can't bear to see those people suffering. What can I do to help? And so that's virtuous. So that's going to have a different shape in this analogy, right? So that's the next link along. So that one's near the hand, the left hand of Yama. And then the next one down, we've got a monkey. It's India. You're going to have monkeys. Lots of them. So this one represents consciousness. So in a way, that monkey, sometimes here it's rather than the building, it's swinging tree to tree, and that's connecting like a past life with a future life, going from one to the other. But here it's through our karma, we generate consciousness. So we could say in one way, because of whatever actions we do, because karma means action, leaves an imprint on our mind that then forms a habit to think, say, or do those things over again. And if it's a virtuous one, of course, we want to build those up by bucket loads, but the negative ones. So just to give you a mundane example, there's also neutral karma. I don't know which one. This is confused karma. They say confused. So on a Sunday morning years ago in Sydney, I would go off. I was doing my theatre work, and so I was going off to rehearsal. But I'd get to this intersection and I'd continue down this road instead of that road, because this was the one I took every other day on my way to work. And so I just had this habit of turning left rather than going this way. And then I realized I've gone the wrong way. It's Sunday. I'm supposed to be going that way. You see what I mean? Is that having enough days to build up a habit of turning that way. It was, I just automatically. So that's how karma works. It just sort of automatically goes that way or whatever, because of our past habits. And so that is not only that, but given that that stores up on our mind, the whole point I mentioned about, my brothers being good at computers and me not, that I hadn't built up that sort of whatever karmic seeds need to have that skill set. I didn't have that, right? So, yeah. So here the monkey shows that the consciousness joins from our present consciousness to the next consciousness. So at the time of death, we're in this very subtle, that clear light mind, which Rinpoche, having control over death, was able to use for meditation. The rest of us are just going to be zapped before we know it into another rebirth. And how did I get here again? Or whatever, maybe we're happy. This is called happy existence in a human form. So it's showing that because of this very subtle level of consciousness that goes from lifetime to lifetime. So the body, of course, stays behind. It dissolves, well, not dissolves, it closes down completely. And then the mind leaves, usually for an ordinary being, sometime within 3 days. When the heat goes from the body, we say consciousness is left. After the breath has stopped, after the brain has stopped, after the heart has stopped. Okay. And ta-da, we land in a new form. So the next one along, down near his left knee, is a boat. And you maybe only see 3, but there's 4 people, should be 4 people in the boat. This is called name and form. Wherever I first heard name and form, I thought, what the hell are you talking about? Name and form, I have no idea. So the form, say the boat, is the physical form of the body, right? Our body, physical form. And then, like in the Heart Sutra, if you look at the Heart Sutra on page 8, I think. So on page 9, up the top, the 3rd line down, there is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance. This is the teaching on the 12 links. There's no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to including no aging, death, and no extinction of aging and death. And then the next part is the 4 Noble Truths. So that part, ignorance and aging and death, that's encompassing the 12 links. So here you have the ignorance and then all these other ones all the way around to the last one, which is aging and death. So the cycle of existence. So name and form is, so we, in the Heart Sutra, as it says, form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness. So here we have the consciousness. Name and form represents, the name is the form, the boat, and inside that, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness. So they also come up around here, so we don't need to go in detail just at the moment.
If I'm confused because there's two consciousnesses. So the one that's represented by the monkey is the subtle consciousness that goes from life to life, and the one, or is the consciousness that is in this life?
No, we're on the next one. So the monkey's no more representing consciousness now.
Oh, okay. So you just
yeah, I know, they jump around, right? So consciousness is consciousness from the gross level of consciousness, most subtle form. Here, because you're talking about rebirth, and you say in the womb, it's going to be a much, or even before that, it's going to be a much subtle level of consciousness. But by the time you take form of a body, usually means that, you know, you're in the womb, right? Somebody's womb. You have a form. Yeah. So in another way, it said that these are all inside. This is the inside of the fertilized egg that these fall. And just to see, I quite like the waves in this one because they don't look very friendly. Represent, if we think about we talk about the oceans of suffering of samsara, waves of torrent, and, you know, all these terms that are used to say, you know, we're buffeted around. It's pretty unstable existence. It's unpredictable. Stuff happens all the time that we're not got no control of or feel no control over. And then the next one along, so it's got these bunches of houses. So they all have a door and 4 windows, even though you can't see all 4 windows because there's one on the other side. And this represents the 6 sense powers. Here it's spheres or powers. So it means that the sense organs aren't yet fully developed, but the potentiality's there. So the beginnings of our sense consciousness is inside the womb. So they're not fully formed, nor have you been born yet. So they haven't come in contact with objects like things I see, hear, smell, taste, touch. Okay. So that's that one. It's the potential for our sense consciousnesses, the basis of those. And from that is generated contact when we do, you might, just to say, this is not one linear progression of how birth comes. If you haven't picked that up by now. This shows the links, how things are connected, but it's sort of in terms of one lifetime, it's not around here. This in the minimum is 2 lifetimes and maximum 3. So it's confusing, but just what everything represents. So once we have our sense consciousnesses, then we see things, we hear things, we make contact with objects, right? And then as soon as we make contact with an object, we have some sort of the next one, feeling. So this here is represented by a man and woman kissing or whatever. So we could say they're pleasant feelings, right? They experience pleasant feelings. So everything all the time in our body is pleasant, it's unpleasant. I mean, I can just feel now, you know, the bits of pain, the bits of comfort, and the bits that I'm just not aware of because it's neutral. You know, I'm indifferent to that. It's neither causing me pleasure nor causing me pain. But these things are going on all the time. It doesn't have to be pain as such, but it's just unpleasant. I just don't like the taste of that. Like mushrooms, slimy things, disgusting. To me, they're unpleasant. Did you know that? Did you have that on your list? Yes. Phew. He offers me meals very kindly. Got a list of, she doesn't like mushrooms. But that's personal to me, right? All of our feeling that we'd say is also a result of our karma, how we experience things, just like the hungry ghost experience this delicious water as pus. I find it quite delicious. Thank you very much. So all these feelings are going on, and we've had meditations on this where we just be aware of the feeling. So this is not emotions, this is feelings as in physical sensations in our body. Pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. We touch something, oh, that's nice. And we touch something else, and oh, that's rough and smooth, and like that. We're doing this all the time. Internally, it's happening all the time. And then when we actually physically in the world engage with things through our eyes, we're doing it all the time, as you know, as long as we're awake, isn't it? Just happening all the time. We're not aware that we're going pleasant, unpleasant, or neither every single moment, but that's what we're doing. And each one of those experiences is a result of past karma. So it says that any pleasant experiences we have in life are a result of positive karma that we've accumulated, whatever it was. So you might think it's the result of the bed manufacturers. The beds just crack me up. I mean, it's been a long time since I bought a mattress, and I felt like I needed a degree in mattresses to, you know, they just did too many good things for me. So can I still feel a pee underneath all this comfort? There you go. We have the positive karma, virtuous karma to experience really comfortable mattresses. Not everyone in the world has that. And even with the most comfortable mattress in the world, some people, you know, still have their back problems. A lot of people, as you get older, backs and hips, and yeah, that's called aging. Anyway, so this is individual to us. So this was one of the reasons that the Buddha gave for, you know, that we should be well content with what we have, not setting up this sort of desires and wishes for things, which comes the next one, craving. So on the basis of those feelings, we want the pleasant stuff and we want more of it. Thank you very much, chocolate, which you also know I don't like, but I understand that most of the world enjoys their chocolate, right? And the ads tell me that as well. So feeling, so from that feeling sensation, it's like, oh, I want more of that. I mean, you'd be crazy if you say, I want more of the unpleasant stuff, you know, that would be crazy. But yeah, so the craving is represented here in the image. There's a person there drinking wine, and the idea that, you know, the craving, you know, the thirst never being satiated and never satisfied, craving more things. So you don't have to be, you know, an alcoholic or anything like that. That comes in the predator realm. But to think that I haven't got enough stuff. And I remember my father at the end of his life, because my mother said he always talked in his sleep. So they didn't have any secrets. I don't think they had any secrets anyway. They were married for 63 years. And I think they pretty much knew everything about it. But she said in his sleep he'd be going, stuff. And I thought, I don't want to be saying that at the end of my life. Stuff. Give it away now. Or don't give everything away. You've got to live. But give away the attachment to I must have. That's what the craving mind does. I've just got to have it. Yeah. And you know, it's that idea of I don't want to be separated from whatever it is, the chocolate cake or whatever. And definitely want to be separated from pain. Thank you very much. Again, and that's not silly. If we've got pains, we go and see Ollie. He's our resident doctor. And that, but if we don't keep that in check, that becomes grasping. See, like with closed fists. Here, that's represented by the monkey in the tree, grabbing at fruit in the tree. And having encountered pretty feral monkeys, I'd say, they'd probably say they were tame in India, they don't wait to be asked. They grab. That was in Nepal. I went to this one temple, which is also called the Monkey Temple, but there's a Swayambhu. When I arrived, there was a gentleman leaving and he gave me a bag of rice. We use rice, like we have geshu sharab here for making offerings and blessings and so forth. So he gave me this bag of rice. And so I sit on this bench to have my lunch before I went around, put the rice next to me. It was gone in a nanosecond. And then when I got I was a little bit over the monkeys by the time I got to the end where I'd come down the steps and was going home. And I had my water bottle beside me. And I had this alpha male opposite me, baring his fangs, and stupidly, I did the same back. And then I realized that's an act of aggression. You've just done exactly the wrong thing. I go, nice monkey, here, have the water. He backed off and, well, he took the water. So yeah, that's what this grasping, like at all costs, I've got to have it. Grasping at existence is what it propels us into having a physical body. So we've got all the grasping at all the things that please our senses, but we've also got grasping at, and this is where it can go incredibly wrong, say bad ethics, like the people I see in prison. Unfortunately, the ones I see are the ones who want to turn their lives around. They realise what they did was getting them into places like prison, and they better change their life. Few, but not everyone's like that. I'm not labelling everyone in prison because everyone's different. But people who engage in bad ethics because, well, I got away with it last time, so I can do it again. Or, we see this amongst, sadly, world leaders, which leads to a lot of world problems. Or, our wrong views, our ignorance, grasping at this self that I'm going to look after at all costs, which doesn't exist anywhere, this self-cherishing mind, all about me and mine, not helping others. Because that me that we grasp at doesn't exist. And because of that grasping at existence, we take birth. So that's the next one, pregnant woman, or existence. It's not yet birth, existence. So she's pregnant. And so what this means is that the karma for your next rebirth is obviously very well established. You've, say, died the previous life, gone into the intermediate state and taken rebirth, from that intermediate state, from grasping at having a body and kabul. Mum and dad get together. They provide the physical form, but it's your mind that goes along with, doesn't come from them. I had to stop blaming mum and dad for anything when I learned about that. I'm just like, I'm so sorry for anything bad I've ever said. At least I got to say that while they were still alive. So yeah, we bring our mind with us. And so then birth happens. And so in one presentation, this then becomes your second life. And then once we're born, we're subject to birth, sickness, aging, death, as the Buddha said. So this last one represents the aging and death. If you can see it clearly, because I can't. It's actually an elderly person carrying a corpse. So it represents both aging and death. Right. And so to reverse that, what's most important, the state of our mind at that time of death, that, other people can provide very good, quiet, peaceful, external conditions. If you're having a death that's a result of an illness and then it's sort of naturally going, but any of us could die at any time through an accident or anything, and altitude sickness. And then, wham, whatever our state of mind is, determines the sort of rebirth we'll take. So the best thing is to keep our mind in, as positive, or at least not negative. A mind of, so if we died with compassion, like again, using one of the examples of one of the prisoners, he said he knew he had, this was in America, sadly, in some states, they still do executions. He had the karma to die. He had so many conditions of karma to die that it was quite phenomenal. So he had got into prison, and then he had encountered, through us, through the Liberation Prison Project, he encountered the Dharma, and then he just wanted to, he was leading meditation for people in his wing, and he just wanted to stay alive so that he could get out of prison and be a Dharma teacher. That's basically was his aspiration. So very positive. And he was genuine. He wasn't faking it. However, he was on death row. And so he was, his lawyer thought he was innocent. He'd been framed by his ex-wife and her. No. Oh, might have been, let's say new partner, doesn't know the absolute 100% facts. He'd been framed by them. And anyway, so he was the one who got the sentence. And he had Dharma practitioners with him at the time of death. He just wanted to be, as I said, he just wanted to be able to continue on with Dharma practice, teach the Dharma and so forth, what he had learned, pass it on. It benefited him, he wanted to benefit others. And in the state he was, the state, as in whatever state it was in the US, they still allowed execution. But what had happened was there was a German company that had given the, provided the drug for sedation. And they withdrew that drug from being allowed to be used for execution because they never envisaged that. They had developed it for women giving birth. Totally the opposite, right? So that's what they had developed it for. So there's no way we're not going to be involved in execution. So they withdrew that drug. And you're supposed to have, for any execution, there's 3 drugs and you have to have 2 sets. So they only had 1 set in the state. And someone else who was supposed to be executed before him got a stay of execution, but he was executed. So it's like, no matter what, yeah, he'd encountered the Dharma, he turned his life around, people believed his innocence, but he had the karma to be killed. So you'd say this karma to be killed came from some past life, right? And hopefully now, as we say, that karma was purified and he could get on, and that he indeed, at the time of his death, because we sent it around the world and people were at the literal time of death praying for him, meditating, praying, and so forth. And he himself, he'd said, I'm going to go out reciting Om Mani Padme Hum, the mantra of compassion. And he did. 17 seconds, between injection and being declared dead. And he recited that. His mentor, who was this a Buddhist monk, had been with him for the last week of his life. They weren't allowed to go into the death chamber. That's not allowed. But they had, the staff just happened to leave the door open. So they were yelling prayers and practices in, and they were allowed immediately afterwards to do the prayers for the time of death. So we say, having all those conditions, like the consciousness is still there, and you're providing, at the very least, positive vibes, helpful. So this is why we do those prayers for the time of death. That a very subtle level of consciousness connects with that. And you could say, isn't that interesting? Everything was saying you're not going to be executed, and yet he was, right? He had the karma for that. So things that we think are unjust or unfair, it's like no matter what, even at the time of the Buddha, there was one of the, the Shakya clan, which the Buddha was part of the Shakya clan, but they had their fighting of territories, not the Buddha, his family wasn't involved with that. Anyway, so that one of these soldiers wanted to avoid being killed. So he withdrew from the fighting, and he ended up in this field which caught a light, and he was burnt alive. So he had the karma to die then. There wasn't any escaping it, but at that point by going somewhere else. Someone else might have got to the field, and a safe field. So our karma is individual. We don't understand it. It's not being punished for things. It's just saying if you engage in negativity, you're going to get negative results. I mean, just in our lifetime, we know that. If I get angry at someone, they're probably going to get angry back. And what does it do? Escalate, keep getting angry. There's no good comes of that. That's negativity all around. And I've caused the other person to get angry on top. Right? Whereas my favourite practice, when I do go shopping, when I go out and about, when I go anywhere, in the car, walking, whatever, smile. That's my favourite practice. Connecting with people, connecting with their hearts. Not everybody smiles back, but a lot do. A lot do. I mean, when you're looking like this, walking around Perth, you want to smile. It's like, otherwise, I mean, it gets over the, she's so weird. I don't know, maybe people don't say that.
I've been in certain suburbs in the far north, and I've been stared at like I was an alien.
Well,
So
it's
smiling
unusual.
is
It's
good.
unusual, you know.
Smiling's good.
Yeah. As I was told, you know, before I ordained, people don't know what you represent, but they do know you represent something spiritual. I'm very happy for that. The number of times this week, again, at the shops, I do sound like I go to the shops a lot, don't I? And two people came up and I said, we've got to have, what is it, business cards. So we're going to get some business cards. So we're walking advertisements.
Didn't you also say you were going to a government agency and you had someone?
Oh, yeah, 3 times. Yeah, I was at Centrelink. So, yeah, 3 times in 2 days. My gosh. So, which is wonderful. It's wonderful to be of that service, you know, for me. And that's, you know, doesn't, you know, I have no power how other people control, but I'm sure you're more likely to get a smile back or at least a sense of not being threatened. I practice on puppy dogs and birds. No, children are easy. Children respond spontaneously. Usually, I mean, sometimes they're a bit fearful because you look odd, but after a little while you start smiling and they start smiling. They can't help themselves. Anyway, so the whole way out of this is we reverse this whole cycle. So again, starting with the ignorance, if there's no ignorance, we don't have the sort of karma, the negative karma that's going to cause us all the rest of the problems. So without that, we don't have that. And that's what it refers to in the Heart Sutra, you know, no ignorance, no karmic formations up to no aging and death. And so we can reverse that whole cycle by following the Buddha's words and, you know, doing what we can to advance on the path towards enlightenment. Sounds good? Sounds simple? This whole thing is complicated. Any questions? Yeah, it is. It's all related.
So where is this?
I'm not Lama Zopa Rinpoche. I have no idea. So Rinpoche, did you hear that Rinpoche had completed the clear light meditation? The one today, yeah, that he'd completed that clear light meditation, the blood that came down. So that usually is a sign when the consciousness leaves the body in a healthy being, because if people are dying of cancer or things, you don't see anything like that. And so that would indicate that Rinpoche's consciousness would have left that body, but we don't know. Rinpoche could still be there in meditation because Rinpoche is beyond all of this cycle of existence. He's like the Dalai Lama. They're, you know, they're beings who are non-terrestrial. I mean, there was never in a moment of being around Rinpoche that I could ever think of Rinpoche as being a regular human being. It's just like on some other world, some other planet, you know. Not in a hippie trippy way, although we did connect with the hippie trippies in the 70s. And a being of that nature is able to, the consciousness to go everywhere. So right now, Rinpoche's consciousness is here, right, with us. you know. So we hold Rinpoche in our heart, and this is why we do the prayers for Rinpoche's return in a form that we can relate to. It's just like, I can't relate to what I can't see, or what I can't see in a familiar form. So, so feel very safe that Rinpoche will return. And I was at a conference nearly 20 years ago now, I think. Gosh, I think it was just yesterday. And Venerable Roger, the CEO of our organisation, and Rinpoche's personal attendant, and Venerable Holly, his secretary, were saying that Rinpoche was saying a list of projects, you know, from his vast vision. We're going to do this in Mongolia, and a big long list, and we're going to do this here and this there. And they're like, yeah, that's a lot of work. And they're looking at each other going, how are we going to do all this? And then they thought, it's okay. Rinpoche is talking about future lives, right? And many people have had that experience where Rinpoche has said, I'm going to ask you to do this and that and whatever. And I go, how's that going to happen? And Rinpoche wasn't talking about this life. He lives in some other space of time of being able to see your future lives and so forth. So, yeah.
I found out you say this 9-day meditation retreat.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so I only had intimate practice at the hotel.
Yeah.
And I was so excited before I took the retreat earlier. And I saw that I was really excited to see Roche was teaching at Singapore and Malaysia.
Yes.
Soon, and I got something booked.
Yes. A lot of people had booked. Yeah.
And then I just say I was in a state of shock. I was in shock for like an hour. I think I froze, and then I started going through all the the emails.
Yeah.
And then I just
yeah. It's okay. I don't know if you were around Rinpoche for not in recent years, but for many years, when he'd mentioned Lama Yeshe's name, his guru, and he would be crying. So it's good. Let yourself cry.
That's when last in Russia.
A money retreat, yeah. So we're doing Budget's up for sock here this afternoon if you're able to stay. That's why you came. Good. Well, we can all have a break, and those who are able to stay, we're doing lots of practices here throughout the week.
I'm flying back to Brisbane.
Are you? Do you go to Longwy Tongpa?
I used to. I've been very easy to work.
Well, you could pop in for the practices, or you can join online. Yeah. If you go to their website, they'll have, yeah. So just whatever you can do, because it's a very special time that if we're making those, and take the long life prayers you weren't here when we recited those. So take those with you and recite those. There'll be more coming. There's one from His Holiness that hasn't been translated from Tibetan yet, or we don't have the translation yet. And FPMT said that they're going to put on, there are other lamas, like it's incredible. All the monasteries, because they, you know, not only us, you know, within our organisation, but Rinpoche was highly revered. His Holiness would always, when he needed a job done, Lama Zopa was his man. You know, so, thank you.
Do you have Lama run the FPMT now?
We got an email this morning from the board saying that Rinpoche had sat with the board in January and indicated the plan going forward, succession plan, if you like. And so they're checking that with His Holiness Dalai Lama, and said at the moment anyway, Venerable Roger will stay on as the CEO. The international office will keep going as it is doing its roles. And Ken Rinpoche, Geshe Choni, taking more of a role. And then we'll see what happens in terms of spiritual guidance of the organisation as well, and how that's going to come about. At the beginning, I mentioned that Rinpoche had said it'll need more than one person to do that role, because, you know, FPMT has grown and grown and grown. So, yeah, will be in safe hands. His Holiness will make sure of that. His Holiness is giving a lot of advice to FPN2. Yeah. So just cherish all the recollections, and you're going back tomorrow to Brisbane. Yeah. I mean, they might, so we're sort of virtually having an open house here during the week, and probably Langri Tapa doing a similar thing. Okay, let's dedicate all our positive energies to the swift return of Kyabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So on page 16, the 2 verses under the mantra. Through the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the precious body mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. And then page 19, long life prayer for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. And then we can still recite the long life prayer for Kyabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche, keeping in mind that, Rinpoche is still accessible to us. Of course, we will continue to recite the prayers for Rinpoche's swift return. But page 22, you who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serves as a bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjanath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers honoring the 3 jewels, Saviour of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. And for Tenzin also, Lord of Dharma, who in accordance with the various dispositions of those to be subdued, makes clear in the light of your well-spoken advice the sacred Ganden tradition, essence of Buddha's teachings. O foremost and holy Lama, to you who are supreme. O Lama, please, please live long. Okay, thank you everyone. And then if people, I know you do this all automatically anyway, able to help turn around the room into puja style, that would be great.